My name is Ronald Walker, and I'm here with.
I'm Ryan McNair, Assistant Athletic Trainer for football here at the University of Louisville.
And I'm coming to you today to ask you about some about injuries and whatnot. What is your definition of an injury?
My definition of an injury is just anything that causes an athlete to incur something to either their body. You can even have injuries to your mind sometimes too. But anything that causes your body, you sustain something to your body that causes you to not function in a normal way.
What are some physical causes of injuries?
Physical causes.
Yeah.
Well, with injury, your body, you have a ton of different parts in your body, so you can injure anything, whether that be a hand, an ankle, a shoulder, and then with all those different things, you can either have a sprain, a strain, you can have broken bones, you can even have life-threatening injuries. So I think when you talk about different types of injuries, they can span a whole different spectrum there.
I heard you talking about that an injury can mess with your, thinking and whatnot. So, what are some psychological causes of injuries?
So, some psychological effects of injuries, so anytime I think, especially when athletes who function at a high level incur an injury, usually what happens is either they all handle it differently. I think some of the causes could, when somebody has an injury like that, it depends on how the athlete responds to it.
Yeah.
So let's say you roll your ankle, you may respond to it differently than one of your other teammates. So I think the pressure of playing at a high level, especially at the collegiate level, can cause some athletes to look at the injury from a negative standpoint, especially if it's something that's going to keep them out for a long period of time. So that can have an effect on their psychological component. If it is an extended injury, something that's going to keep them out for a long period, I think that some people respond differently to that. Some people look at it as a challenge. Some people look at it as a negative. And then they start this negative thought process, and then some. So I think it just depends on the person and how they respond to it.
So what type of emotional responses have you seen from athletes with bad injuries?
I've seen them all. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of guys respond in a positive way. I think we've had a couple guys have some serious career-ending injuries. I've seen some guys go through that. Some guys respond to it really pretty well, and some guys don't. I think in my experience, I've had some people respond to it in a positive way. They look at it like a challenge, where some other people look at it like this is just going to keep me out and it's keeping me from doing what I want to do, and so they don't approach it, in a positive way, and then therefore their rehab and everything after that comes kind of in a bad. It doesn't go as smoothly as the people who approach it in a positive manner.
So basically, what you're saying, there's something like poor adjustments to injuries.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes, there is poor adjustments to it. I think anytime somebody is injured, it's a difficult situation for any athlete to go through. You take an athlete who is used to functioning at a high level, and they're used to their body performing, in a certain way, and then you take something to disrupt that. I think that's hard for some athletes to get over. I think they have to go from being this elite athlete to now being this something that's broken, and now they've got to get better so they can go back to functioning that way.
Yeah. What can college athletes do to avoid injuries?
Do to avoid injuries?
Yeah.
All different kinds of things. I think one thing that we're big on here, especially with our athletes here for football, is that we try to do a lot of prehabs. We do a lot of preparations stuff to try to keep you from getting injured. Especially, I think a lot of that starts in the weight room. I think with the way you guys lift and the way you work out, some of the things that the strength staff focuses on, and a lot of times the lower leg lifts that you guys do, or our football players do, really kind of is aimed at trying to prevent the ACL injuries. A lot of the shoulder stuff you do in the weight room is aimed at preventing shoulder injuries, weak shoulders. You do a lot of shoulder strengthening there, a lot of stability stuff. I think a lot of that stuff you can do on the front end to try to prevent injuries. I think at the same time, too, nutrition has a big part of it. Eating right, hydrating, taking care of your body in the right way on the front end will keep you from being injured on the back end.
So, what are some how can you learn from an injured athlete?
How can I learn from an injured athlete? Well, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is, let's take, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a guy with an ACL a couple years ago, and this was his second ACL. And what I learned from him is that he had every right to be mad, to be upset, to come at it in a negative way and think, man, this is my second time going through this. But he approached it in a very positive way. He looked at every day as like a challenge. And I think what I learned from that is his attitude had an impact on me as his athletic trainer. And I think it had an impact on everybody around him because he really approached it in a positive manner and took it as a challenge instead of a negative. And then he came back from that. And I think what that taught me was that if I ever come across something in my life like that, I hope I would approach it the same way he did.
Yeah. What are some relationships between stress and injuries?
Stress and injuries?
Yeah.
Well, I think stress, there's been some research to show that stress can break down the immune system in the body. It can also, I think it has a negative effect on the body. In what way, physiologically, I do not know. But I can tell you that if an athlete is not in the right frame of mind, I think the body doesn't really function as a whole. I think the body, it functions, the mind is part of that. So if the mind is not in tune with the body, I think a lot of times that'll throw everything off and just can put an athlete in a bad position to get injured, whether they're just not focused and dialed in on the field, not focused on the things they need to be focused on, and they get that attention drawn away for just a second, and boom, an injury happens.
Are there any copying skills you would recommend to an athlete that suffered a serious injury?
Coping skills?
Yeah, coping skills.
Coping skills. I would say just a positive attitude. That's the number one thing I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You're facing any athlete that's facing a significant injury. I think you're up against a situation where you're not used to. You don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty there, whether you're going to be out for a long period of time, whether this is a career-ending injury. I think approaching every day with a positive attitude is the number one thing I would recommend as a coping mechanism for that. I think the minute you start getting into a negative thought process and start thinking negatively about the whole thing and the whole situation, I think that just makes you bitter. I think it makes you not focus your positive energy on the right things, and that's doing the things you need to do day in and day out to get yourself healthy again.
How would you I guess try to push an athlete that's injured and he's not really feeling so good about the injury, he's not putting in extra work to get better?
I think every athlete is different, so I think you have to find different ways to approach them. So if this guy has a negative attitude, I know he's not feeling really good about this injury, we're going to take our time with him. We're going to really try to meet him, set small goals and accomplish those small goals to start off with, and see if we can start pushing it a little bit and accomplishing bigger goals. The athlete with a positive attitude, or you can generally kind of like, hey, let's get after it today. Let's start doing things a little bit different. Let's push it a little bit. You just have to approach each athlete differently. Every athlete responds to injury differently. So they can be a positive person normally, but if they get injured, they may become really negative. So I think you just have to approach each athlete differently, and then you have to just see where they're at each day. Yeah. Some days you may come in with a bad attitude, or maybe just not feeling it today. Well, okay, let's just work on a couple of things today, and let's give you that day, and maybe we can come back tomorrow and kind of make some ground up tomorrow.
Well, that's the end, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Doing that.
You're welcome.
My name is Ronald Walker.
Ryan Vicknier.
There we go.